How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Virtual History 360. I'm Mr. Wade, and you are joining me live for our review for Jacksonian Democracy. You have an exam coming up, or you're just trying to review Jackson, you're in the right spot. My water bottle's making a lot of noise. I apologize for that. How are you doing today? It is a wonderful, happy Monday. I hope everyone is doing great. Remember, we have the chat, so go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what class you have. If you have Miss Ing, Miss Thomas, or myself, let me know. And we're going to have a great review. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes once everyone gets in, because I know it takes a few minutes for YouTube to send out the reminder. I know people are busy, so we're going to start it quickly. But I want to give everyone a chance to get in, okay? So it's 7:31 on my clock, so let's see how we're doing. I hope everyone's having a great day. Hope everyone had a good Monday back. If you are in Osceola County, you know we had rodeo day off on Friday and we had school today. If you're anywhere else watching, you probably had President's Day off. Our county does it just a little bit different because if you watch my history of rodeo day, you will see that kids used to skip school to go to the rodeo, so the school district just made it a day off. Well, other schools have done different things. I mentioned in the video that up north where I'm from, we used to have Deer Day off for the first day of buck hunting season. So, same basic idea, okay? Santiago, so I'm assuming you're from Mr. Santiago? That's awesome, welcome. Let's see. Oh my goodness, it's 7:32. We'll give them a couple more minutes, see how many people we got in here. And then we'll start talking about Jackson. We've got a handful of people in here. Not bad, not bad. Oh my goodness, what a day it was. If you have me in class, I told you a story of how exhausted I was today because I had a history grant, and we traveled to Alabama this past weekend to learn more about the civil rights movement and actually meet people involved in the marches and plannings and all the the Freedom Ride and the marches and just a ton of incredible information and incredibly powerful sights to see. But man, it was a long weekend. I told my students I left my house at 5:30 Friday morning to head to the airport, and I didn't get home from the airport until 10 o'clock last night. So it was a long weekend. Divine, welcome. I see you in the chat there. Welcome. I'm glad you're here to review. I apologize if you hear my dog barking in the background. Sounds like Mrs. Wade is home. But yeah, welcome. But you know what? No matter how tired I am, I'm still here for you guys. We are going to get through this exam that you're scheduled to take tomorrow, and we are going to review Jackson if you're just here to learn. So I appreciate random subscribers or just random people finding this stream. Quincy, I see you in the chat. Thank you for chiming in. I'm happy to have you here. Let's say one more minute and then we will get started on the context. But as always, remember, there's the chat. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I will stop what I'm talking about to address your concerns because I'm here for you guys. All right? Now, the chat remember is 30-second delay. So if I ask a question, I don't expect you to answer, to see your answers till about 30 seconds or so. Or if you put a chat, and I don't answer right away, it's because there's a delay. Okay, so let's not worry too much about that. But again, the chat is there for you to ask for help. But oh my goodness, 7:34, almost ready to start. Got a handful in here. Man, remember the first live stream review we had? Oh my goodness, we're up to 18 or 19 people. We need to get back to that. Goodness gracious. All right. So, we are studying Jackson, okay? You have a gap, I guess you would say, from, where we finished because of Thursday, then having the 3-day weekend, and then the test tomorrow. So there's been a little bit of space. So we're going to go over all the material. We're going to cover the scale 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to get you ready, okay? I hope if you're a student that you have finished your levels 1, 2, and 3 assignments so that you can show mastery of the levels. I will happily sign off on that tomorrow while you're taking the test. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check our yesterday's history and go through the levels, okay? But it is now 7:35 on the nose, so let's get started. Our standard is SS8A416. 416, identify key ideas and influences of Jacksonian democracy. Not very, specific in the title, but the standard goes into what happened during his presidency, okay? So if you look at your scale that you have glued into your notebook, or what we've talked about in yesterday's history reviews, you know that level 1 dealt with the expansion of voting rights. That's the big takeaway, okay? Andrew Jackson ran for president in 1824. It was a mess. There were 4 candidates that really had a chance, and it went basically like this. Jackson received a plurality of the votes, but not the majority, so it went to the House of Representatives. The House was influenced by Henry Clay, who was in 4th and had no chance of winning because the rules only take the top 3. So he, not liking Jackson, not the elite that he was, suggested that the House support John Quincy Adams. So John Quincy Adams wins the election. But before the 1824 election, they started lifting property requirements in some states, and by 1828, I think every state had lifted its property requirement, which allowed Jackson to appeal to the average citizen, not the rich landowners. By appealing to the average person, Jackson used his own history of coming from the log cabins in the Carolinas to, growing up in Tennessee as a commoner, a common man, and working his way through the military to achieve his status. And this common man image gave him the win in 1828, thanks to, in most part, the voting or the property requirement being lifted to allow Jackson to appeal to more people, which allowed him to get more votes, which allowed him to beat John Quincy Adams in 1828. So he used his I came from a log cabin in the Carolinas to get people that are living, at the lower level of the financial ladder to support him, even though he himself by that point was not on the bottom of the financial ladder. Okay? Which, as I was giving you that description of level 1, it really reminded me that you guys should really review your vocabulary as well. I know I usually harp a lot on focusing on the levels, but really go back and review the vocabulary. I used the term plurality and majority just now. I don't know what's going on in my living room. I don't know what I said. Another vocabulary word you should know, mudslinging. Remember, that was making, you're trying to discredit your opponent by making personal attacks. And believe me, they really attacked Andrew Jackson, making bad comments about him and his wife. So mudslinging's a big one. Make sure you know what mudslinging is. What other vocabulary words should you know? Let's see, veto was a word, right? I don't have the list in front of me. I'm trying to remember all 10. Veto was one, because I know we dealt with that. But yeah, go through the vocabulary. That's a big one. All right, so I've talked for about 3 minutes. I'm going to pause and before I continue and say, if you have questions, that's what the chat's for, okay? But like last test, this one's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to roll through the standards as a review. Again, hopefully you're here and you've got questions to ask, but you can watch this on replay. And, you'll get this information as a review for the test, okay? So let's continue. What else do we need to talk about? I think that covered level 1, right? All white men were able to vote because, remember, women couldn't vote until the 19th Amendment. Black men couldn't vote until the 15th Amendment, and then Voting Rights Act in 1965. So white men could vote at this point, but all white men, they didn't have to own property. Okay? So I think that wraps up level 1. Property requirement gone. Then let's go into level 2. You have, let's see. We have 2 big ideas that we have to focus on. That is the Tariff Act and the bank veto. Let's start with the Tariff Act. Remember, tariff is a tax on imports, right? Customs duty is the money. Tariff is the law. Getting back to the vocabulary. They imposed a very huge, a 60% tariff on European goods. This made European manufacturers happy because a tariff is designed to promote your own goods, domestic goods, in this case American goods, at the expense of foreign goods, imported goods, specifically in this case from Europe. Well, New Englanders, where they manufactured a lot of the goods that were in competition with Europe, were happy with this tariff because it made their goods more appealable. In the South, not so much. The South sold the raw materials to Europe, so they were afraid that Europe would stop buying their goods because they couldn't sell the goods over here. And they were afraid they were going to get hurt by that. And then on top of that, because they couldn't sell and they were spending more, they were losing money. So the South was opposed. Specifically, we focused on South Carolina being opposed. Okay? South Carolina, led by John C. Calhoun, who was vice president at the time, who eventually stepped down as vice president because he opposed this so much, said this is an unjust law that's hurting South Carolina, so we are going to nullify, another vocab word, nullify it and not pay it. We refuse to pay this because it's unjust to us. It hurts us. Now, if you think back to the XYZ affair, and that led to the Alien and Sedition Acts of John Adams' presidency. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions nullified the Alien and Sedition Acts, but that was before Marbury v. Madison and judicial review was established by the Supreme Court, where it was accepted that the Supreme Court would determine if laws were constitutional or not. But here's John C. Calhoun in South Carolina stepping up saying, we are going to declare this is unconstitutional and not pay it. Now, they said, if we are forced to pay this, we are going to secede. Vocabulary. We are going to secede from the Union and break away from the country. This is going to be a recurring theme as we go through the rest of the year. But South Carolina threatened to secede if they were going to be forced to pay this tariff that they thought was unfair. Andrew Jackson said, I'm going to force you. And he got Congress to pass, and he signed into law the Force Bill, which basically said that the federal government could use the military to enforce its laws. That's pretty harsh, right? Comes back later. You'll learn more about this in high school, but this show of force, lack of a better term, had them butting heads, and they came to the table and compromised. Jackson agreed to rescind the Force Bill. South Carolina, agreed to pay the tariff as long as they phased it out. Now, we know it wasn't perfect, but it worked out. But, man, it really, really strained the relationship between the states and the federal government. And this is just like the seed that's starting to grow as we move forward in our curriculum. Okay? And then you had the bank veto. Jackson always hated the bank. He felt it was unfair to the frontier. He thought that it was... let's see, I'm looking at the chat. Jim Crow laws. Oh, yeah, that comes back later. Yes, in big time. After Reconstruction, though. Okay? What's the most important thing you need to know that's going to be on the test? Everything I'm covering, effectively. I'm not, unless you want me to just read the questions, I'm not going to do that. But levels 1, 2, and 3. I just reviewed level 1. I'm in the middle of reviewing level 2, and then level 3. That's, to answer your question, that is the most important thing that we got to review, okay? So let's get back to the bank. Jackson always hated the bank. He thought it was elitist. It only helped the people in the Northeast. Didn't help the frontier at all. He felt that it had too much power being a single entity, what we call a monopoly, one having all the power instead of shared among many. So he was after the bank from day one. Now, the bank wasn't terribly unpopular across the country, just in pockets. So his political opponents argued that if we put up the bank, he won't veto it. We can renew its charter. And if he does veto it, he's going to lose the election. So before the 1832 election, they put up the rechartering of the bank, and Jackson vetoes it. Okay, you can watch my video on Jackson versus the bank, and it goes into greater detail than I am today. But he vetoes it. And unfortunately for his opponents, he got reelected anyway. Well, in 1836, the charter expires, the bank is closed, federal government pulls out all of its funds, and basically all the regulation goes away. State banks now control the money. State banks start issuing currency to pay for everything, and the more you have of something, the less it's worth. Inflation, vocabulary, right? This inflation leads to an economic depression known as the Panic of 1837, which takes place during Martin Van Buren's presidency. Martin Van Buren has this laissez-faire approach of let it solve itself. He probably should have done more, but we do give him credit for establishing the Federal Treasury, which is different than the National Bank. It's not a for-profit entity. It's just a place to regulate the cash flow. So eventually it does solve the problem, just not as fast as people probably would have liked, right? So how did this hurt the country? A lot of people lost their jobs, lost their land, and it took a while to come back from it. So the bank veto, you could argue, hurt the country. But at the end, it, you know, all right, not goofy, you might as well leave. There's no point you being here. Anyway, where was I? So the bank veto hurt the country. The Tariff Act strained the relationship. It was not a very good time under this, okay? And then that leads us to, where was I? I want to make sure I hit all my notes here. Make sure I hit everything. Personnel, tariffs good. All right, and then that leads us into level 3. I think I've covered everything for level 2. Level 3 is dealing with the Indian Removal Act and how it was detrimental or hurtful to the Native Americans, asking the Native Americans to relocate from their land, right? The Indian Removal Act was designed to push natives off of their land so that white settlers could take that land. Remember the map I showed you about Georgia, why Georgia specifically is focused on because they discovered gold on the Cherokee land. So of course Georgia wanted to take control of that land so they would have access to that gold, okay? So the two tribes that we focused on, were the Cherokee, who resisted by going through the court system, all the way up to the Supreme Court. We'll get to that in a second. And then the Seminole, who fought back physically in the Second Seminole War. Okay? Before I go on, I see a question. In your opinion, what do you think is the worst, the bank veto or the Tariff Act? That's a great question. I think the Tariff Act foreshadowed what states were willing to do, and in the end it kind of washed out. The bank veto led to a depression that hurt many individuals. So in my opinion, I would argue, oh, trolls. In my opinion, I would argue the bank veto hurt the country more. Again, coming out of it with the Treasury was somewhat of a benefit, but, where was I? It was some sort of benefit, but as far as actual suffering, I would think the bank veto gets that, because the Tariff Act, it kind of went away after a while, and tariffs come and go. They go up, they go down. So in the grand scheme of things, if we're looking at just those two events isolated, oh, hey Jayla, I was going to say I should have recognized the name, but I should have known. I would argue the bank, but that's just my opinion. You could go either way, okay? All right, so where was I? The Indian Removal Act. The Seminoles fighting back physically with the Seminole Wars, fighting against the military, holding them off, eventually effectively losing. Some Seminoles, did not surrender. They stayed in Florida. That's why they are considered unconquered. Not all Seminoles survived, okay? The Cherokee, unfortunately, they took their case all the way up to the Supreme Court. There was multiple cases, but we focused on Worcester v. Georgia, and John Marshall said it's a federal treaty that the Cherokees had, so Georgia had no right to mess with their land. And then we have that famous Jackson quote, Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Well, if the executive's not going to enforce it, there's not much the Supreme Court can do, and the Cherokee were forced off their land when the New Echota Treaty was signed, which is a very controversial treaty because it represented 500 out of 17,000 people. So the U.S. kind of snuck in on that one. And that leads to the Trail of Tears. And the Trail of Tears was just horrendous. Before they even left, after being rounded up in camp, disease wiped out about 2,000. And then on the trail itself, since they were marching in the winter, between 2,000 and 4,000 people died just trying to get to Oklahoma. Remember, Indian Territory became the state of Oklahoma. Okay? So, yeah, not good. That's why we focus on the detriment, because leading to war or just death, no matter how they resisted, it did not end well for the Native Americans. That's why we focus on that. All right. So we are about 20 minutes in, 15 minutes into the actual review after I gave that buffer. So yeah, Georgia wanted the land. The Cherokee sued. Wasn't enforced. They got kicked out anyway. Let's see. I think that covers everything. You need go over vocabulary, go over levels 1, 2, and 3. Rewatch this review, and honestly, I think you'll be fine. Um, really, I, I covered everything. This was a quick one. This was only about 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a minute to catch up. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But really, I think we've covered everything, and it'll give everyone a chance to do well tomorrow. It should be a relatively straightforward, easy test. So I'll give you about another 30 seconds. If you have questions, put them in. Let's see. Do you think there would be the same outcome if the Seminoles did not fight back? Well, today there's more than 2,000 Seminole. Only a few hundred survived, but they have grown over the last 100 odd years, so 170 years. So would have been the same outcome if they would have just signed a treaty and left. I don't know. I mean, the reservation system is flawed, and that's something for a conversation for a different day. We don't need to get into that tonight, but that's a great question. Do I think it would have been the same? I don't know. It could be. You could argue that they would have repopulated elsewhere, but I think they made better for themselves by not surrendering. So, by fighting back, and so no, I don't think it would have been the same. I don't know, but I'm leaning towards I don't think it would have been the same. I don't think the Seminole would have been as successful had they surrendered, had they not fought back. I think they had the advantage of knowing the Florida terrain, and I think that gave them time. Okay. Oh, that's a good question, Isaiah. I don't know a total. I know it was a lot on both sides, really. Not by today's standards, not by Civil War standards by any means, but it was fairly, heavy fighting. Like we talked about the Dade massacre. 100 soldiers were killed just in one battle. Again, it gets much worse as we move through history, but at the time, that was a significant number. I mean, it still is significant. I shouldn't say it like that. But they were fighting for their land, and they were fighting to stay, and they ended up being displaced a little, but there's a sense of pride in being unconquered, right? So, those are good questions. I like that. All right. What else you guys got? I like these questions. I went through the material because there weren't many questions, to slow me down. So what do you got? Anything confusing? Anything you need help with? This is your chance. Give me another 30 seconds or so. Because if there's no questions, there's no sense. You can just rewatch the video over and over again, and hear the same material. But if you have specific questions, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to drink of water while I wait. It's interesting to try and time the delay. Alright, let's see. If Chief Australia was not there alongside the Seminoles, do you think they would have had the strength to stand up for themselves? That's a good question. He was a good leader. People followed his lead. The Dade Massacre, Osceola wasn't there. So, to answer your question, I would say yes. Would it have ended differently with a different leader? Maybe, but I think they still would have had strength. I think someone would have stepped up. I do believe that Osceola was a good leader. But I do believe that they were willing to fight no matter who they were following. I think he was just the leader they chose, the leader they followed. That's a great question. I like that. Why did America still continue the war against the Seminole even after the losses? I don't get that one, but okay. Why did the Americans continue the war against the Seminoles even after the losses? Like the Third Seminole War. To try and put them in their place, to try and get them to go away. Really, because if you think about it, the First Seminole War was Jackson trying to stop Seminole raids into Georgia. So protecting Georgia and protecting the farms in Georgia really was it. But then by, the time the Third Seminole War rolls around, Florida's a state. Okay? So it was really keeping the Seminole in line to allow the, now Americans to expand into the new territory. And move further south into Central Florida where we are now. Apologize if my thing is buzzing. I'm getting a bunch of text. That was a good question too. I like this. See, this is what I like. I like the conversation. I don't mind going over the material and giving you guys stuff to review, but really, I like this conversation. This is what's fun for me. I like when you guys ask questions. Let's see. Just to be sure, the Treaty of New Echota was the same treaty that stated the Cherokee tribe would leave. Yes, it was. It was what led to the Trail of Tears. Okay? And again, it was controversial because it was a small group representing the whole. But yes, it was what led to the Trail of Tears, which led to the death of between 4,000 and 6,000. Okay? So yeah, not a good thing. Okay? I love this. This is fun. So yeah, voting expansion, vocabulary. Let's go back. Vocabulary. Go through the words. What was it? Mudslinging, veto, tariff, plurality, majority. Stuff like that. Trying to remember the vocab words because I don't have them in front of me here. They're not in my notes. Then level 1, the expansion of voting rights, lifting the property requirement. So now it wasn't just landowning white men, but all white men. Okay. Let's see, the Tariff Act, taxing European imports. New England liked it, South Carolina hated it. And then the Indian removal. Let's see, why did the Americans try to move out the natives even though they had a treaty? Because they were greedy, I think would be the best response. I'm not, I don't know what else I could say. I would argue why, because follow the money. And remember the map I told you about, the finding gold on Cherokee land or expanding farmland. It's the same reason the Powhatans were displaced when Jamestown started to grow. They needed more land for farming, so they took the land to grow tobacco. It's been happening since the 1600s, really. Even longer if you go back to the Spaniards in Florida. But it's why. That's why they want to make money. Why didn't the Cherokee try fighting back too? I've never read a good answer to that. Why didn't the Cherokee try fighting back? That's what I'd have to read more. I believe it was because of the timing of everything. They tried to go through the courts, and then when New Echota was signed, it just happened, and then I don't know. They weren't necessarily a warrior-based tribe. They were, remember the civilized tribes? They were agricultural. I don't have a good answer. I'm thinking, but I can't really pinpoint one here. So that's a good question. Isaiah, you're really good at that. You know that, right? You ask me questions that stump me. I like that. Why didn't they try fighting back too? Now, what I've read, just to kind of tie this up, I just can't speak for the whole. There were some. There's small instances that I've read about, but as far as a whole, I don't know. It could have been the fact that, the military swept in and land that wasn't as treacherous as Florida, and it was much easier because of the way they were settled in New Echota that it wasn't as defensible as the guerrilla warfare in Florida. I don't know. I'm thinking my way through this one. It's a good question, though. I like that. Yeah, not to say 0 people fought back. I'm not going to say that. But speaking as a whole, I would argue that. I'm not the expert. I don't know. But that would be my guess. Well, yes, Divine, yes. They were following the courts. They were trying to do this non-violently. Okay? So they had the treaty, so then they got their own nation, officially, even though they already signed a treaty 30 years before this, 40 years before this, and then they went through the courts. So that was their way of fighting back, just not violently. Okay? Did the Americans try to re-enslave black Seminoles? Man, you guys are on today. I love this. I don't know. My assumption would be yes. If I had to take a guess, if you were testing me, I would say yes. I would believe, but that requires capture and transportation. And they were coming out of the west, so not from the north. So I don't know. I imagine if they were captured near the Georgia border during the Second Seminole Wars, before Florida was a state, then yes. If it was during the Third Seminole War, then I would say most definitely, because Florida was a slave state. So I would say yes. But I haven't read anything about that. I've read about runaway slaves being captured, the Fugitive Slave Act. When we get to that, oh my goodness, it's horrible. We'll talk more about that. But the Black Seminoles, I don't know. Man, you guys, I love this. This is fun. Keep them coming. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I have not read a specific example, but I'm sure we can find out. Yeah, you got me thinking though. I like it. I like it when you guys stump me. What else you got? All right, because at this point it is 8 o'clock. It's a little after 8. It's almost 8:01. Give you guys a couple more minutes. If you don't have questions, though, I am going to end this at around 8:03. So I'll give you about 2 more minutes unless the questions start coming, okay? Again, vocabulary, review the levels, go through your notes, go through Canvas. Everything is there, okay? Hopefully I covered Jacksonian Democracy if you're not a student and you're just reviewing this. Okay? Let's see, did the Seminoles get other tribes to fight against the Americans or only them? I believe they tried, but because of the location, by moving into Florida, they were fairly isolated. If you ever look at maps of like tribal locations in the 1830s, they were fairly isolated. If you go into, the Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi corridor, there's multiple tribes, and you could probably, and see how they would communicate. But you cut off that I-10 corridor of Florida, and you move into Central Florida, where a lot of the Second Seminole War was fought. They were cut off. So I don't believe I stand on this one. You didn't really stump me because if you break it down, I don't think they tried. I mean, did they try? Maybe. Were there some? I can't speak for 100%, but I would say, did they get other tribes? Like, speaking of whole tribes, I would say no, just because of the location. All right, so 30 seconds, and I'm going to cut this off. If you can still see me, because I'm curious if it's buffering or not. Let's see. Wait, so in order to treat later on, Cherokee tribe declared an defense after any rose. Divine, I'm going to take a step back. Don't confuse this, okay? Let's just go step by step and simplify, okay? Because I don't want it to get in your head, okay? The Cherokee were forced to move. They were told that they were going to be removed, so they sued the state of Georgia, and the Supreme Court said don't mess with them, okay? That was ignored. So the U.S. government tried to move them, and they went to a small group of Cherokee who then signed the treaty, okay? So let's not overcomplicate, okay? And this treaty agreed for them to move, and that's when Winfield Scott moved in and rounded them up, okay? Uh-oh. Hope this isn't about... I'm starting to get yellow messages on here, so if I freeze, I apologize, okay? When the Cherokee got to their new location today, suffer a lot from the loss of... Oh, yeah. It took years before I wouldn't even say recovered fully, but they were down. They were wiped out almost. A quarter or to a third even were gone. So yes, they suffered. Were there tribes within tribes? That's kind of a European view. I hope I'm not frozen. The idea when explorers from Spain came over, they would name the tribes based on their language. So the Wally tribe, Guale tribe in northeast Florida, Georgia area, the Spaniards called them the La Lingua de Wally. So the language of the Wally. So tribes spoke similar language, they were lumped in. So based on European naming, yes, there were tribes within tribes. If you were, being specific to communities, then no more than any other group. Our classroom has different groups of people, different cliques of friends, right? Kind of the same idea. All right. Keep them coming. I'll stay as long as you guys are asking questions. Divine, I want to go back to you real quick though. Did that make sense? Did that clarify it? Okay. I don't want to confuse. I don't want to, convolute this with a bunch of stuff. So I'll simplify it. All right, Divine, let me know if you're good, okay? If not, I'll try again. Okay. You guys stretch this out a couple minutes longer, but I'm not seeing questions. Wonder if Quincy's still here. He hasn't put anything else in the chat. Again, Divine, I need you to tell me if you're good or not, okay? What are the key vocab words we would need to know for a test? Let's see. Veto is a big one. Tariff, understand what a tariff is. Mudslinging, a personal attack, making your opponent look bad by calling them names. Plurality, majority, because Jackson received the plurality, not the majority. I think relocate was. I don't have the vocab in front, so I'm trying to remember what's on your list. Okay, yeah, Divine, I just wanted to double check. I want to make sure you're good, okay? But yeah, those 5 or 6 I just named, those are the big ones. Let's see. Did the Americans ever let some natives to remain on all land, or was all land taken? As far as leaving them to practice their nativism, no. If natives swore allegiance to the United States and were to change their way of life, then yes. Make sense? So it's kind of the same lines of, Spain accepting runaway slaves. If you swore loyalty to Spain and renounced your way of life and joined the Catholic Church, they would allow former slaves to come in. So if you, swore allegiance to the United States, then you get to stay. But if you remain true to your tribe, then you were forced off. Ooh, I pressed the button to table at some point. I just saw the camera shake. Sorry about that. Alright guys, so I think this was a good review. Again, rewatch the first 15-20 minutes, or fast forward until I get started, and then watch that first 15-minute section. Again, I go over the levels, and you can catch that review your notes, review the vocab, and you're gonna rock the test tomorrow. You guys put in the time. You are here reviewing when you didn't have to be. So I appreciate you giving up the time of your evening so that we can be better prepared. And you guys are going to do awesome tomorrow. I have no doubts in my mind that you guys are going to rock out on this test. Okay? You are going to be awesome. Remember that, okay? Worcester v. Georgia. That was the case where the Cherokee sued Georgia because of the federal treaties they had signed, because Georgia was trying to take their land. So Chief Justice John Marshall said that Georgia couldn't supersede a federal treaty. So he ruled in favor of the Cherokee, but Andrew Jackson ignored it. Okay? Was the Indian Removal Act unconstitutional in any way? It depends on if you consider Native Americans to be citizens of the United States, which they didn't at the time. Okay, so if you're viewing them as citizens of the United States, then yes, of course it's unconstitutional. But because they were viewed as separate and they didn't get any rights until the Native American Citizenship Act of 1934, I believe. Don't quote me on the year. I could be wrong. I'm tired. But because of that, because they didn't have the rights of citizens, then no, they weren't protected constitutionally. So if they were citizens, if it happened to us today, yes, it would be unconstitutional. But because of the way the laws were written, they weren't protected by the Constitution. Because again, they were their own nation, right? Okay. Alright, did the Americans try to force the natives to switch their ways to their... Oh, yeah. Because then they could, sell them their land and, make money off of it. So, yeah. And then they wouldn't cause, quote-unquote, problems or good trouble, as John Lewis would say, because they were assimilated to the American, system, capitalism, the way of life. So they tried, and if they accepted, then, like I said, they were allowed to stay. If they didn't accept, that's when the forced relocation took place. All right, last chance, because it's 8:10 and I'm hungry and I haven't eaten my dinner yet. All right, tell you what, if you're a student, think of any questions you have and then you can bring them to me before we take the test, I'll ask you if there's any questions, okay? So I'm going to end this stream here. I hope everyone has a good evening. Get some rest, eat a good breakfast so you're rested and fed, and we will take the test tomorrow. Last question. Did the Americans force religion upon the natives who chose to stay and become like American? Let me think. I don't know if it was forced. I know it was heavily suggested. And the communities might have had a say individually, but to give a blanket answer, I am not sure. Okay? Individuals might have. So when you say did the Americans, if you're speaking of the individuals in the communities, I would say probably. If you're speaking as a country who stayed, I don't think it was a countrywide policy, so don't know if I would say no, but based on the individual level, probably. Okay? Alright, so we've been doing this for a long time. It is 8:11. Please get some rest, eat some dinner, get some breakfast in the morning, come ready to take the test tomorrow. Alright, so good job everyone. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share this out. Tell your friends to watch this because I want them to do well. You guys did put in the work and ask the questions, but they can at least watch the review. Okay? Because, again, I want everyone to be successful. That's why we do this, right? So please have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.